example of how they might not want to change. But we need to remember that if we are to launch a war, okay, we're talking about countries where the effect of the absence of democracy is enormous. Okay? It's destructive. We're talking about the massacre, the huge human rights violation. We're talking about the minorities' rights are being oppressed. We're talking about women from tribes, from the tribal areas are being raped and systematically destructed. We're talking about this desperate condition, which eventually requires a desperate action, ladies and gentlemen. Which is why we disagree when they say that they will never use war to instill democracy, because we argue that there are cases where war is actually justified. Now later on, I'm going to extend the case of opening up a system into two levels. First, I'm going to talk on how the sense of democracy is in the roots of the problems in this oppressive regime and how their sovereignty thus can be breached. And second, how the non-organic change or transformation has failed, therefore we need to intervene. Now, before that, Satya came up with this idea of how war is damaging. Of course, we also agree that people will die. We agree that some innocent people might die. But we think that this is something that they need. Okay, this is the sacrifice that these countries need. Because at the current status quo, okay, they are already suffering. Their people already die without a certain noble cause. But in the war that we're going to launch for democracy, we actually have a greater goal, ladies and gentlemen. And their example about Iraq, they forget to mention that Iraq right now is already progressing. Now they do not have the biomass bomb anymore. They are not afraid of the authoritarian government anymore. They now have a new coalition government and people can actually aspire. So we need to take a look at what happened after the war in Iraq. Now the second thing, interesting thing that Satya mentioned is about separatedness, how they want to protect individual, how there may be some people are happy with their condition. Now, we say that it is very risky to have this assumption because we're talking about a very extreme oppressive regimes like North Korea, like Myanmar, where their government are they're not subtle about it, okay? So they actually tell the world that they're killed the citizens and they're okay about it. And when we're talking about this kind of government, we cannot have this separatedness or the assumption that people might like to be as a justification to continue the condition. Now, my first argument is about the essence of democracy. Now, we believe that the essence of democracy is the basic roots of the problem. Riot, chaos, or even tribunal wars are occurred because there is no legitimate channel for them to opinionate, to aspire of what their aspiration is to their government. The tribal wars can also caused by unfair resource distribution, which is also happening because people cannot have check and balances inside their government. Many cases happen in Africa, in places like Sudan or Zimbabwe, where there are conflict of resources simply because there is no channel of it. Now, we think that inside this condition, the government has failed to provide security for the people. Because essentially, the reason why each country has sovereignty, the concept of sovereignty, is because it's going to protect their society. But in these extreme cases, they have failed. Therefore, their sovereignty is no longer absolute. Now, currently, we have so many approaches, okay, to instill democracy. We have soft approach, we have talk, we have lobby. We also have things like sanction or embargo. But those things does not work. Okay, people still suffer. People still cannot aspire what they think to the government. And we think that this concept is too abstract. Okay, sovereignty is too abstract. While people suffer are concrete. Therefore, we need to deal with this. We cannot let people in Myanmar, in North Korea, or even in Cuba, which is now already have Raul Castro, but still his communist economic approach still causes disadvantage to their people. So we think that in this extreme condition, you do need to infringe sovereignty before I move on.
Right. So,
okay, please.
So you haven't really explained to us, given these properties, why forever and ever organic changes are never possible.
My second argument, why non-organic change is not possible. Now, we already have the tendency to aim to democracy. Now, the reason is many They were close to any kind of information. They did not know that they have a choice. They did not know that there are other worlds in where they can live happier when their choices are being heard by the government. They do not have the exposure of what their democratic value is. And most importantly, these people do not have the ability to fight against their government. Okay? In some countries, they do not have the power to do coup d'etat, for example. They do not have the power to fight against their government. Now, in this kind of condition, therefore we need an extreme measure like war. Because what war entails, obviously we will not launch war to any countries. Okay, so we're not talking about light-headed, very light-headed leaders. We're talking about stubborn leaders in a very rooted regime, like Afghanistan, North Korea, or Myanmar, which after 30 or 40 years of democratization, it still failed. So we're saying that in cases where organic change is not happening, we also need to do this, ladies and gentlemen. Because all in all, what we want to fight for are the people. Okay, people is one thing that government needs to protect. People is one voice that government needs to hear. Currently, many of them, several of them, are still untouchable. We need a very strict and a very straightforward action, which is war. Because by war, you will be able to come into a country and actually take it, topple down their government